Have you ever wondered why almost all overpowered tactics on Football Manager use these team instructions? Well, today we're going to look at counter and counter press and why they work on Football Manager. Now, first things first, the truth is they don't always work all the time, but you're better off using them in most games, and we'll look at situations where counter and counter pressing could also be hurting your tactic. So what exactly is counter and counter press? Now, according to Football Manager, the counter instruction will ask your players to launch an attack and seek to take advantage of any opportunities left by dispossessed opponents. In my experience of playing Football Manager, the counter can happen at your defensive third. That's when you regain possession in your own half and then carry the ball to your opponent's half and complete the attack. And it can also happen in the opposition's half, where you regain possession high up the pitch and look to score a goal before your opposition settles in their defensive shape. From this explanation, we see that counter is not only reserved for teams that are sitting in a low block, you can also have the counter instruction working for high pressing tactics. That is why most overpowered tactics have this instruction turned on. Now, this counter instruction favors players with good work rate, acceleration, agility, balance and dribbling. And it also helps to hide players with poor decision making, passing and vision attributes. Now, the opposite of counter instruction is the hold shape instruction, and this encourages your team to regain control of the game the moment they win possession by retaining possession and getting into position before launching a calculated attack. The counter press instruction will ask your team to immediately apply pressure when they lose possession of the ball in hope that they can recover it as quickly as possible. Now, it's important not to confuse the counter press with the high press. The counter press instruction works whether you're playing in a low block, a mid block or a high press. The high press is a line of engagement. It defines the zone where your team will start to press the opposition organically. But with a counter press, this happens as soon as your team loses possession of the ball. This can be in your defensive third or in your attacking third. Does the line of engagement affect the counter press? In my opinion, no, it shouldn't. Why? Because the counter press is not so dependent on your opposition but on your team and the location where you lose possession. For example, let's say you're walking the ball into the box near the opposition's defense and your team loses possession of the ball. The counter press will trigger your nearby players to press and try to recover the ball. If you lose possession in the middle of the pitch or in your defensive third, the same counter press trigger will happen and your players nearby will still try to regain possession of the ball as quickly as possible. In real football, some managers have a time frame of about 7 seconds of relentless counter pressing. This means if the team doesn't win possession back within those 7 seconds, they all get back into their shape and defend from there. In Football Manager, this is difficult if not impossible to replicate. The counter press favors players with good aggression, bravery and work rate. Defensive attributes like positioning, tackling also help with the counter press. The counter press hides players with poor marking, concentration, heading and jumping reach. This is why Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team were not the biggest or the strongest physically, but they could press any team in numbers and recover the ball. So what are the flaws associated with the counter and the counter press instructions? I know most OP tactics have this instruction set in stone, but in the long run, I won't recommend using these instructions all the time. If you are playing against a team that is good at passing or playing out of tight spaces, they could easily string a few passes together and beat your counter press. However, I recommend you do keep the counter press selected, but you have to watch the game and see if it's actually working. If your team is struggling to recover the ball despite the counter press, you can take it off and save your stamina. Speaking of stamina, towards the latter stages of the game, if you notice that your players are getting tired, you can consider taking off the counter press. What about counterattacks? Counterattacks are not all perfect too. If you always have counterattacks, you may notice that sometimes your team gives away possession easily. This is because of the risk involved in the counterattack. If you notice your team giving away possession too often, consider taking off the counter instruction. If you are struggling to gain any control in a game, consider holding shape when you regain possession. I hope this gives you a better understanding of counter and counter press in Football Manager and why they are really relevant in most overpowered tactics in the game. For more Football Manager in-depth tactical guides like this, subscribe to DarkHorseFM and I'll see you in the next video.